You know what they say about being careful what you wish for? Well, nobody ever told the Vaelthrin Council that particular piece of wisdom. And trust me, we really should have listened to whoever came up with that saying in the first place. My name is Kryx97, and I'm what you might call a communications officer for the Vaelthrin Deep Space Monitoring Station. Or was, anyway. Hard to tell if I still have a job after what happened next, but I'm getting ahead of myself, aren't I? 3 cycles ago, everything was blissfully boring. The most exciting thing that happened during my shifts was when the coffee synthesizer broke down, and even that got fixed within 2 standard hours. We monitored 17 different star systems, tracked asteroid movements, and occasionally picked up random radio chatter from primitive civilizations who'd just figured out how to send signals into space. It was peaceful, quiet, safe. Then the Krygon showed up. Now, if you've never encountered a Krygon war fleet, consider yourself lucky. These aren't your garden variety space pirates looking to steal some cargo and call it a day. Oh no. The Krygon are what happens when you take pure malevolence, give it advanced technology, and then add a healthy dose of let's destroy everything just because we can. They rolled into our sector like a cosmic hurricane, and within 6 hours, they'd already glassed 2 mining colonies and were working their way through our outer defense grid like it was made of tissue paper, which, considering how effective our defenses turned out to be, might have actually been an upgrade. Commander Voss 2-1 was having what you might call a complete meltdown. The poor guy's mandibles were clicking so fast they sounded like a broken percussion instrument, and his usually pristine uniform was soaked with stress secretions. Not a pretty sight, even by Vaelthrin standards. Options. He barked at the command center, his voice cracking like an adolescent's. I need options, people. Lieutenant Zara 55 looked up from her tactical display, her face the color of spoiled milk. Sir, at current engagement rates, we have approximately 14 hours before they breach the main defense perimeter. After that, she didn't need to finish. We all knew what happened to civilizations that got in the Krygon's way. What about reinforcements? Voss 2-1 demanded. The Galactic Defense Union? The Terran Coalition? Somebody. Oh, that's right. I should probably mention that we knew about humans at this point, sort of. They'd made contact with the Galactic Council about 50 cycles ago, and the general consensus was that they were a promising but relatively harmless species. Good at diplomacy, decent traders, and they made some surprisingly palatable food products, but militarily. Well, let's just say they weren't exactly known for their combat prowess. Still, when you're facing complete annihilation, you tend to become less picky about your potential saviors. The nearest GDU fleet is 12 days out, reported tech specialist Mira 83, her tentacles dancing nervously over her console. Terran Coalition has a small patrol group about 6 hours away, but it's just a survey vessel and 2 escorts. Voss 2-1's laugh was the kind that makes you wonder if someone should check his medication levels. A survey vessel? Against a Krygon battle fleet? That's not reinforcements. That's a suicide mission with extra steps, but you know what they say about desperate times calling for desperate measures. And brother, we were about as desperate as a species could get without actually being extinct. Send the distress call, Voss 2-1 ordered. His voice resigned. All channels. Emergency frequency. Maybe somebody somewhere will hear us and, he trailed off, probably realizing how pathetic that sounded. So there I was, sitting at my communications array, crafting what I was pretty sure would be our civilization's final message to the galaxy. No pressure, right? This is Vaelthrin Deep Space Station to any vessels in range. I began, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. We are under attack by Krygon forces and request immediate assistance. Repeat. We are under attack and require immediate assistance. Our defensive capabilities are insufficient to repel the invasion. Please, if anyone can hear this, help us. Simple, direct, and completely hopeless. I sent that message out on every frequency we had, bouncing it off communication relays, emergency beacons, and even some old commercial satellites that were probably broadcasting advertisements for extinct soap products. If there was an intelligent species within 50 light years that didn't hear our cry for help, it wasn't for lack of trying. Then we waited. And waited. And tried not to think about what Krygon interrogation techniques were rumored to involve. The response came exactly 4 hours and 37 minutes later, just as the enemy fleet was beginning their final approach. It was a human voice, speaking accented but clear galactic standard, and it was so calm it was almost insulting. Vaelthrin Deep Space Station. This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the Terran Coalition survey vessel Phoenix. We have received your distress call and are en route to your position. Estimated arrival time is 43 minutes. Please maintain defensive positions and prepare for coordinated tactical response. The command center went dead silent. Even the background hum of the life support systems seemed to quiet down, as if the entire station was holding its breath. Voss 2-1 started, then stopped, then started again. Did that human just say they were coming to help us fight a Krygon battle fleet? I double-checked the message log. Yes, sir, that's exactly what she said. For the survey vessel. And 2 escorts, sir. Voss 2-1 looked around the command center like he was waiting for someone to tell him this was all an elaborate practical joke. When nobody did, he sat down heavily in his command chair and put his head in his hands. Well, he muttered, at least we'll have witnesses to our destruction. The Krygon fleet consisted of 12 heavy cruisers, 8 destroyer-class vessels, and 1 absolutely massive dreadnought that looked like someone had taken a small moon and covered it with weapons. Our tactical computers estimated their combined firepower at roughly equivalent to a small supernova, which was probably being conservative. Against this armada of death and destruction, the humans were sending, well, we weren't entirely sure what they were sending, because our long-range sensors kept insisting that the approaching Terran vessels were exactly what Captain Vasquez had claimed, 1 survey ship and 2 escort frigates. There has to be some mistake, Lieutenant Zara 5-5 insisted, studying her tactical readout for the 15th time. Maybe they're using some kind of stealth technology, cloaking devices, hidden weapon systems, or maybe, suggested Mira 8-3 with the kind of morbid humor that emerges in life or death situations, they're just really, really brave. There's brave. And then there's suicidal, Voss 2-1 replied. This is so far beyond suicidal, it's in an entirely different category of poor decision-making. But as the human ships approached, something strange began to happen. The Krygon fleet, which had been maintaining a steady advance toward our position, suddenly slowed, then stopped. Then began what could only be described as milling around. What are they doing? Voss 2-1 demanded. I'm not sure, sir, Zara 5-5 replied, her voice puzzled. They seem to be conferring. There's a lot of encrypted communication traffic between their vessels. Maybe they're trying to figure out what the humans are up to, I suggested. I mean, this has to be as confusing for them as it is for us. The human ships arrived exactly on schedule, dropping out of hyperspace with the kind of precision that suggested they'd done this sort of thing before, which was disturbing, considering what this sort of thing appeared to be. Captain Vasquez's voice came through our communications array again, still maddeningly calm. Vaelthrin Deep Space Station. This is Captain Vasquez. We are now in position. Please stand by for tactical coordination. Captain Vasquez, Voss 2-1 responded, trying to sound professional despite the circumstances. I feel obligated to inform you that you are facing a full Krygon battle fleet. Our tactical analysis suggests your chances of survival are, well, they're essentially non-existent. There was a pause. And then Captain Vasquez replied with what sounded suspiciously like amusement in her voice. Commander, with all due respect, your tactical analysis might be missing a few key variables, such as the fact that humans have a very different approach to impossible situations than most species. Before Voss 2-1 could ask what that meant, the lead Krygon vessel opened communications on a broad channel. The voice that emerged was like gravel being processed through a meat grinder, speaking in the harsh, guttural tones of the Krygon language. Attention. Pitiful prey species and foolish humans, you will surrender immediately, or you will be destroyed. This is your only warning. Captain Vasquez responded without hesitation. Attention, Krygon fleet. This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the Terran Coalition. You are in violation of 17 different galactic treaties and have committed acts of aggression against a peaceful civilization. You will withdraw immediately or face the consequences. The silence that followed was so complete you could have heard a pin drop in the vacuum of space. Then the Krygon commander began to laugh. It was the kind of laugh that suggested he found the entire situation hilariously absurd, which, to be fair, it kind of was. Tiny human vessel threatens mighty Krygon fleet. The commander wheezed between bursts of laughter. This will be remembered as the most amusing moment before your destruction. Actually, Captain Vasquez replied. And I swear I could hear the smile in her voice. I think this will be remembered as the day you learned why humans don't make empty threats. And that's when things got really interesting. The human survey vessel, which our sensors had been insisting was nothing more than a lightly armed research platform, suddenly lit up like a festival display. Weapon systems that shouldn't have existed began powering up. Shield generators that were supposedly impossible started humming to life. And what we had thought was scientific equipment began reconfiguring itself into things that definitely weren't designed for studying asteroid compositions. What in the seven hells is that thing? Zara 55 whispered, staring at her tactical display as if it had personally offended her. The two escort frigates were undergoing similar transformations, thus unfolding like mechanical flowers to reveal weapon arrays that made our defense platforms look like children's toys. And all of this was happening while Captain Vasquez continued her casual conversation with the Krygon commander. You see, she explained, as if she were discussing the weather, humans have this interesting habit of preparing for the worst-case scenario. When we designed our survey vessels, we thought to ourselves, what if we encounter hostile forces while we're out exploring? What if we need to defend peaceful civilizations? What if we run into something like, I don't know, a Krygon battle fleet? The Krygon commander had stopped laughing. In fact, the entire enemy fleet had gone ominously quiet, which is never a good sign when dealing with a species known for their aggressive tendencies. So we built our ships with a little something extra. Captain Vasquez continued. We call it adaptive configuration technology. Most of the time, it's perfectly innocuous scientific equipment, but when the situation calls for it. The human vessels completed their transformation, and suddenly our tactical computers were having nervous breakdowns trying to classify what they were looking at. The survey ship now registered as something between a heavy cruiser and a dreadnought, while the escort frigates had become, let's just say our weapons classification system didn't have adequate terminology for what they'd become. When the situation calls for it, Captain Vasquez finished, we become something else entirely. The Krygon commander's response was everything you'd expect from a member of a species that had built their entire culture around intimidation and superior firepower. Yet he opened fire with everything he had. What happened next was educational. The Krygon fleet unleashed enough firepower to sterilize a small planet. Plasma cannons, particle beams, fusion torpedoes, and weapons whose names I couldn't even pronounce lit up space like an angry star going supernova. For exactly 3.7 seconds, it looked like the most spectacular light show in galactic history. Then the humans started shooting back. I've seen a lot of things in my career as a communications officer. Solar flares, asteroid impacts, even a rogue black hole that wandered through our system about 20 cycles ago. But I had never, ever, seen anything quite like watching human weapons technology in action. The first thing that happened was that all the Krygon weapons fire simply stopped, not blocked by shields, not deflected by armor, just stopped, as if someone had reached out and politely asked the deadly energy beams to please cease existing, and they had graciously complied. Did they just cancel physics? Mira 83 asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't think they canceled it, I replied, watching the tactical display with fascination and growing terror. I think they just asked it very nicely to work differently for a while. Captain Vasquez's voice came through our communications again, still maintaining that infuriating calm. Krygon Commander, you have just demonstrated hostile intent against a peaceful species under Terran Coalition protection. This constitutes a Category 7 violation of galactic warfare protocols. You have 30 seconds to begin withdrawal procedures. The Krygon commander's response was predictably violent and involved several anatomical suggestions that would have been physically impossible for most carbon-based life forms. But what really caught my attention was the edge of panic creeping into his voice. Here was a member of a species that had terrorized half the galaxy for generations, and he was scared. That should have been our first clue about what was coming next. 20 seconds. Captain Vasquez announced pleasantly. The lead Krygon cruiser fired again, this time concentrating all its weapons on the transformed survey vessel. The beam struck what looked like empty space about 50 meters from the human ship and simply scattered. Like water hitting an umbrella. 15 seconds. 2 more Krygon vessels joined the attack. Same result. Their weapons' fire dispersed harmlessly into the void, while the human ships hung in space like they were parked at a leisurely space station. 10 seconds. Bed. Now the entire Krygon fleet was firing, pouring enough destructive energy into the space around the human vessels to crack a moon. The humans absorbed it all without so much as a hull temperature increase. At 5 seconds. The Krygon commander must have realized that conventional tactics weren't working, because he ordered his dreadnought to ram the survey vessel. All 700,000 tons of armored death began accelerating toward Captain Vasquez's ship at maximum thrust. Time's up, Captain Vasquez said. What happened next redefined my understanding of the word violence. The human survey vessel didn't fire a weapon. Exactly. Instead, it did something that made our tactical computers give up and display error messages in languages that hadn't been spoken for millennia. Space around the Krygon dreadnought began to fold, not like a hyperspace jump, but like someone was carefully creasing reality along invisible lines. The massive warship, which had been charging forward at ramming speed, suddenly found itself moving in 17 different directions simultaneously. This is not, as you might imagine, conducive to maintaining structural integrity. Sweet merciful void, breathed Lieutenant Zara 55 as we watched a vessel the size of a small city turn itself inside out in 4 dimensions. What did they do to it? I believe, said tech specialist Mira 83 in the tone of someone whose worldview had just been fed through a quantum shredder, they convinced it that forward and backward were the same direction. The dreadnought's destruction seemed to snap the remaining Krygon vessels out of their shock. They began a fighting withdrawal, laying down covering fire while trying to put distance between themselves and the humans. This turned out to be about as effective as their previous tactics. One of the human escort frigates moved. I use the word moved loosely, because what it actually did was translate from one location to another without bothering with the space in between. One moment it was beside the survey vessel, the next it was sitting directly in the path of the retreating Krygon fleet. Attention! Fleeing Krygon vessels, came a new voice over the communications array. This one belonged to a woman with a slight accent I couldn't identify. This is Commander Sarah Martinez aboard the frigate Righteous Fury. You are attempting to leave the engagement zone while still in possession of stolen Vaelthrin technology and classified military intelligence. Please prepare to be boarded. The Krygon response to this suggestion involved several creative threats against Commander Martinez's ancestry and a renewed barrage of weapons fire. The frigate Righteous Fury's response was to demonstrate why humans had apparently named their ships after emotions rather than tactical designations. What emerged from the frigate wasn't exactly a weapon. It was more like concentrated disapproval, a beam of energy that didn't destroy the target Krygon cruiser so much as convince it that existence was overrated. The vessel simply faded away, like a bad memory being gently erased. That was our please comply politely setting, Commander Martinez announced. Would you prefer to experience our we asked nicely setting instead? The remaining Krygon vessels decided that retreat was the better part of valor. Birdie. or possibly that staying in the same star system as the humans was hazardous to their continued existence. They broke formation and scattered, engaging their hyperdrives in what could only be described as a panic stampede. The humans let them go, which, in hindsight, was probably a tactical decision designed to spread the word about what had just happened. Vaelthrin Deep Space Station. This is Captain Vasquez, came the familiar voice as the human vessels began reverting to their innocent survey configurations. Immediate threat has been neutralized. Are there any casualties or infrastructure damage that requires assistance? Commander Voss 2-1 stared at the tactical display for a long moment, watching the Krygon fleet signatures disappear into hyperspace. Then he activated the communication system with the deliberate movements of someone who wasn't entirely sure reality was still functioning properly. Captain Vasquez, this is Commander Voss 2-1. We have no casualties, no infrastructure damage. In fact, we have no idea what just happened, but we are extremely grateful for your assistance. Just doing our job, Commander. Captain Vasquez replied, though I should mention that we'll need to file some paperwork about this incident. Galactic Council regulations. You understand, paperwork. Voss 2-1 repeated slowly. Standard post-engagement documentation. Nothing too complicated. We'll forward you the forms. There was a pause. Then Voss 2-1 asked the question that had been burning in all our minds. Captain, if you don't mind me asking, what exactly are you? Captain Vasquez's laugh was warm and genuinely amused. We're humans, Commander. We're explorers, scientists, diplomats, and traders. We prefer peaceful solutions to conflicts whenever possible. And when peaceful solutions aren't possible. Another pause, longer this time. When Captain Vasquez spoke again, her voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before. When peaceful solutions aren't possible, Commander, we become something that makes peaceful solutions possible for everyone else. The human ships began moving away from our position, their transformed weapons systems retracting and folding back into innocent-looking scientific equipment. Within minutes, they once again appeared to be exactly what they had claimed to be: a survey vessel and 2 escort frigates on a routine exploration mission. One more thing, Commander, Captain Vasquez added as they prepared to depart. You might want to upgrade your sensor arrays. The specifications we're transmitting should help you detect cloaked vessels and identify concealed weapon systems. Consider it a gift from the Terran Coalition to our Vaelthrin friends. The data packet that arrived contained technological advances that would have taken our civilization centuries to develop independently. Sensor technology, shield generators, and defensive systems that were so far beyond our current capabilities that our engineers would probably spend the next decade just figuring out how to read the blueprints. Captain, Voss 2-1 called out as the human ships prepared to jump to hyperspace. Why? Why help us? Why give us all this technology? Because you asked, came the simple reply. You sent out a distress call asking for help, and we heard it. That's what civilized species do for each other, isn't it? And with that, they were gone, leaving us alone with our intact station, our upgraded technology, and our completely shattered assumptions about the nature of the galaxy. The aftermath was interesting. Word of what had happened spread through the galactic community faster than a hyperspace communication relay. Within days, we were receiving visits from representatives of dozens of species, all wanting to know exactly what had transpired during the engagement. The Krygon, for their part, seemed to have developed a sudden interest in peaceful diplomacy. Apparently, the survivors of their fleet had shared some very detailed reports about their encounter with human military capabilities, and the Krygon High Command had decided that perhaps terrorizing innocent civilizations wasn't such a profitable enterprise after all. The Galactic Defense Union requested a full briefing on human tactical capabilities. The response they received from the Terran Coalition was polite but firm. Humans preferred not to discuss their military technologies in detail, but they would be happy to assist any peaceful civilization that found itself threatened by aggressive forces. As for me, well, I got promoted. Turns out that being the communications officer who successfully called for help and lived to tell about it is considered a career-enhancing experience. Who knew? But the real change was in how everyone looked at humans after that day. Before the incident, they were seen as friendly but unremarkable newcomers to the galactic community. Decent enough folks, good for trade agreements and cultural exchanges, but not exactly major players on the cosmic stage. Now, when a human delegation arrives at a diplomatic gathering, conversations tend to get very polite very quickly. When human traders show up at space stations, they get the best docking berths and priority service. And when someone mentions that they're having trouble with pirates or raiders, there's usually a suggestion that maybe they should send a message to the Terran coalition. The humans, for their part, continue to be exactly what they always claimed to be: explorers, scientists, diplomats, and traders. They still prefer peaceful solutions to conflicts. They still send out survey vessels to catalog new star systems and make contact with newly discovered civilizations. But now everyone knows what happens when peaceful solutions aren't enough. The message is simple, really. Humans don't go looking for fights, but they're very, very good at ending them. They'd rather be your friend than your enemy, but if you insist on being their enemy, well, that's a choice you'll only get to make once. 3 cycles have passed since the Krygon incident, and our sector has been remarkably peaceful. Pirate activity has dropped to essentially zero. Aggressive expansionist movements have found other territories to focus on. Even trade routes that were once considered too dangerous to use are now seeing regular traffic, all because we sent out a simple distress call that said, "Help us," and the humans heard it. You know what they say about being careful what you wish for? Well, it turns out that sometimes, just sometimes, you get exactly what you need, even if you had no idea what that was until it showed up and politely rearranged the local space-time continuum to solve your problems. I'm still a communications officer, by the way. And I still monitor the emergency frequencies, listening for distress calls from ships and stations throughout our sector. But now, when I hear someone calling for help, I don't just relay the message to the nearest defense force. I also send a copy to the Terran coalition. Because if there's one thing I've learned from this whole experience, it's that humans have a very interesting definition of the word impossible. And sometimes, when everything else has failed and all hope seems lost, what you really need is someone who doesn't believe in impossible, someone who hears a cry for help and responds not with excuses or limitations, but with 3 simple words: "We'll be right there." The galaxy is a much safer place when you know that somewhere out there, someone is listening, someone who cares. Someone who, when push comes to shove, can convince physics itself to step aside and let justice have a word with the troublemakers. All they said was, "Help us." And the humans came. And everything changed.